Welcome to the inaugural session of the CHSS seminar series. This semester we will be hosting 4 different genres of seminars. Today we'll have a roundtable discussion with our guests. I'll turn it over to Dr. El Hamoumi, who will introduce the topic for you, and then the panel will take the discussion.
Today we will talk about culture and the human brain. Because two topics, very complicated topics in social sciences. Culture, what is neglected, and the human brain was monopolized by biology. As you can see in this is your brain, 1,350 grams. Can think by itself? No. You push it back inside your brain, can think? No. What is going on? How the brain in our evolution developed. Why in our biological evolution it takes million or billion of years to arrive to this structure, what we have now. And another evolution, that's historical evolution, go the speed of light, move us to the highest speed in civilization, science, and so on. Okay. As you can see here in this slide, we have no reason to assume that the human brain underwent a necessary biological evolution in the course of humanity. Our brain will have nothing. Brain can never really produce language, produce sciences by itself. We are here too, human, biological human being, and cultural human.
Well, you said the brain is lost between singularity and wholeness, which is, so will it be a good explanation if we consider being a genius is wholeness rather than being singular, falling into singularity? Because although the brain, and I know you look at it in a philosophical point of view differently, but basically, as you said, the brain by itself doesn't do anything. The brain basically just to process the information that comes from inside. So if I have a child that never faced with any kind of sensation, the brain cannot create anything from nothing, So you talked about singularity and wholeness. And am I right if we consider being a genius is wholeness because somehow you combine all the information you get and you try to process it, and in the same time you try to make a sense out of it? So it's some kind of wholeness rather than singularity.
No, the singularity is, I'm talking about what is going on in the highest form of the social sciences, structuralism and neuronal man. That's what we're living now.
Yeah, I understand.
But
if
the
we
individual,
can compare it to brain function.
Yeah, the brain function. What happened? We have, we have 3 experiments in the history of human being. The first, everyone knows it, I think, the first experiments done by Frederick II of Prussia, Germany, in the mid of the 13th century, in which he isolates babies from their mothers. He went to where language come from. Which language Adam spoke to Eve? No answer. He said, okay, we move these children from their mothers, and he instructed the nurses, the doctors, don't talk to them, don't touch them. When they turn 23, because in developmental psychology, when 23, you start talking. Now we decipher which language. You know what happened? None of them survived, all dead. They have everything, food, health, but most of them dead. Second, we have the experiment, this called the forbidden experiments. Second, we have Victor of Avignon in France. They discovered it in 1812 and at the age of 12. And Itard did everything to educate him in the first, I think, the biggest, the Deaf and the Mute Institute in Paris, the oldest one. They did everything to help him to acquire language. Never. And Genie, at the age of 13, they discovered in Los Angeles, the same, 13-year-old. That's what he said. There is critical, what Lindenberg came with the idea, what they called critical hypothesis. If you don't learn the language in one stage, of your life, you can never learn it. Now we know 12 and 13.
And also walking. If you cannot walk in
The
a
same,
certain stage, you cannot.
same.
Yeah.
Therefore, the environment play a major role. Now, why we spend this multi-billion, like last year, $1 billion, the European Union gave it to study the brain. Why we don't develop the soil of the brain, education, culture, and open this to flourish? But the singularity, the human being, we all, as human being, lost completely in the modern life.
You said the people who are mentally retarded and people with brain damage, they don't use language as or use words as tools. Is it true that people with mental retardation don't use language or words as tools, given that some people may not be severely retarded? They may be only mildly retarded, and they are capable of receiving education up to grade 6, for example. So how can you interpret this?
No, because
explain this?
One thing I emphasize it there, how to create tool, sign, like language, to connect these children who's suffering, this human being suffering from deficiency or with special needs, to the heritage of the culture for the last 200,000 years. They succeed with blind, they succeed deaf mutes, but we all progressing in this. Like why we neglected them? Not they use concepts, but we know how to connect them to the culture. That means like now I'm expressing my idea in language. Language between you and me is the medium. We need to create that medium to connect them to the heritage of the culture, the heritage of the science, the heritage of achievement of human being. There is, in my view, there is no special needs. No. The brain, we develop the brain, not the brain develop us. We must discover something.
I think this is very
Education.
controversial.
Huh?
It is controversial because the brain plays a role and culture plays a role. So culture without good brain will not have any influence.
Well, I think
there is no good brain.
There is.
The primitive, okay, the prime. This I hate this concept, primitive. 2,000 years ago, the same structure of the brain. What
But
has
maybe-
changed is
This is the culture.
the environment
I
has
totally
changed.
agree with you regarding the people who are called primitive or early people. The brain structure may be the same, but people with mental retardation or brain damage are different. So the brain is not intact.
I told you, Parkinson's disease. If you asked him to go to this door, can't climb, he climb it. Something climbing, you need a really complex
But
mathematical
is there
structure
something
to
in
move
between-
this body.
Is there something in between? Like,
Yeah.
there is a very famous story of Carla. She's autistic child. She was always autistic in England. And then suddenly she start typing. And now she have her own blog. And she start communicating by typing. So is language, does it have to be spoken or any kind of
Any
communication
mediation,
that we
any
understand?
mediation, yes, any mediation.
Any kind of.
Like writing, like sign language. But this is the biggest problem. We see the brain as the guiding machine. No, we must create something. And that's, I think, the biggest problem, the social science. I know why. Because all the research funds sponsored by the pharmaceutical companies, they went to see, they went the drugs to solve all this mental illness, all this disorder, all this mental retardation. No, and we see the famous mathematicians, scientists, they suffer from autism. Beethoven, he wrote really the masterpiece when he lost.
Hearing.
What is going on?
And I think he was deaf when he made his last symphony.
Deaf, the best.
The Ninth Symphony.
Therefore, we don't want to look inside the brain. We must develop new tools to connect that person to the wealth of the accumulated knowledge, heritage. That's what you're doing here.
What if you try and you keep doing? Because I agree somehow in between what Dr. Abdullah said and what you said. There are some people with special cases, and I know that the caregivers are trying their best, and they are giving them, their family or whatever. They're really in good institutes, and they are trying to give them. They develop, but some of them to a certain stage, and they cannot go beyond it. Okay, so in my opinion, I cannot say, yes, I know as a biopsychologist that things that come from inside, this is what activates the brain, but sometimes what the brain has, like Dr. Abdullah said, is not, it doesn't have enough neurons to process whatever coming from outside. So if you have complete brain damage, I know Alzheimer Parkinson is a different case. The brain was a hole, and then it was, and the brain is a plastic, so basically it will find a detour.
Way.
But those who are born with very few neurons already, the brain already is, smaller than average. It's already damaged. I think with culture, with education, you can give them to their potential, highest potential. But sometimes their highest potential is not enough to process all what you can get from the culture.
Well, the culture what they've developed is so-called normal culture.
But maybe it's not normal.
We never know. I really, all my study, I don't know how the blind culture, I never leave it. Or deafness culture, I never leave it. See what happened? Because we bring in, and all the research done by the people like you and me, who
So
are
to
normal.
say that this
You
is
want
the
to
right
talk to,
thing,
yes. Now I went to see the blind, how just the blind perceive color, perceive life. The only who knows it, a scholar from the deaf or
You
from
can
the
never win when you're
blind.
talking to a philosopher, Doctor.
No, not philosopher, this is
You
real.
always have, but this is a very good idea. Like me, I never thought about it. But who told us that this is the normal?
Yeah.
We said this is the normal.
The normal, yes. Therefore, our brain really is culture. Culture it is.
Sounds
That's what you are moving now from the neuronal man to the cultural man. But what I see in this neuronal man, neuroscience, they combine the mechanical animal structure by Descartes and Aristotle. We're all coming back. The problem is with our biological makeup, not.
Yeah, but I still argue that the brain plays a very important role. I think the culture might help the brain to incorporate and assimilate knowledge, and it will produce new type of knowledge. So the brain is capable of making new type of knowledge out of the knowledge that it gets from the culture. I think it may be safer to say that the interaction between culture and brain will result in what we consider as change or as development in human knowledge in general.
Yeah. We have example. The most powerful thinker on the face of Earth from 1970 up is Steve Hawking. Steve Hawking, he was paralyzed. Look at this, even he can't move his, and he was classified the most powerful thinker in science. What happened? We have this, almost the biological structure is okay for us. Why we not arrive to his? He can't even move himself. And the brain damaged. You know how many damaged? The brain is damaged almost. I don't know how many percentage.
Because ALS, he had ALS. It does not damage the brain. It damaged the motor neurons.
Yeah, the motor, yes.
In the body, usually.
Yes, but how he and the culture, he was surrounded by smart people, helping him, reading to him, doing like lecture like this that take him 40 hours. But that lecture go published in a book.
And Helen Keller.
Yeah.
The same thing.
Yeah. Now we invest. That's what makes us is education, culture, learning.
This is a new. I mean, it's not a new, but I'm really interested in the highest potential of people with a special need, and we are looking at it as really low potential. But who are we to decide?
Yeah, because we are in the beginning, we don't know how to help them.
Yeah, like I know this is red because everybody's telling me this is red. But if I'm colorblind, and
Yes.
everybody telling me this is a green,
Yeah.
then people who say this is red will be considered abnormal.
Abnormal.
You know,
Yes.
but I decide who's normal and who's not
Yes.
normal. And if the majority like me, then we always look down upon the people who are different than us. So now you make me think like, maybe you're a little bit racist in, labeling
Yeah.
the people with mental retardation and the people who we feel they're a little bit different than us or look at things different.
Actually, my interventions come from my background as an archaeologist, not as a psychologist.
Archaeology,
So
yes.
it is. I just want to raise the problem of from the very first beginning of your presentation, the biological evolution, and from his point of view, who drive who? The brain drive culture or culture drive brain? Actually, how we in archaeology look at the human brain. And a very recent study actually on the conducted last year on about 35 human skull, ranging in data from 300,000, 350,000 to 8,000 years ago, and compared with 100 skull in modern time, modern human. The study shows that the human brain, the size of the human brain, remain the same for more than 250,000 years ago. But what changed is the physical shape actually, from more flatter to rounding. And this is due to the change in what they call the parental cerebellar area, which is the area responsible for knowledge, language, emotion. And this is actually raised the question for us as archaeologists, that culture can influence or drive the physical changes of the human brain. Another very interesting study actually also conducted on the experiments on the practicing primitive ancient technology and more advanced ancient technology. And this also shows that primitive technology, very less part of the brain is engaged. While when we practice advanced technology and, for example, producing the stone tools, knapping, and something like that, the most part of the brain is engaged, and mainly the right sphere of the human brain. So I think culture can impact the human brain and influence the changes in the human brain, not anatomically, but maybe physically, as proved by the study of the human skulls, and even in the cognitive at the cognitive level.
Scientifically, it is yes, because people who play music, the area in the parietal lobe associated with finger movement, it gets bigger. Okay, than the people who don't use music.
Yeah.
So actually, yes, and this is now like the field of epigenetic, which is a very big now, and it says that the lifestyle and the life experience, it does affect not your DNA expression, but it does affect your brain and your life as a whole. So even the gene expressions, not the DNA, but the gene expressions. So yes, it is very well known fact, especially now, as you said, that culture and life experience does affect. It's just like a muscle, so you have more muscle. So the same thing, if you use something.
I show you the size of the brain. We have here one giant thinkers like Victor Hugo. Everyone knows giant thinker. See how many his size? 5 pounds. Okay, the giant thinker in the history of human. Look, Anatole France, 2 pounds. A child, 7, 8 year old. This and Anatole France, a giant thinker. Therefore, they have nothing to do with the size of the brain. One, 2 pounds, the other. Second, this research that in help archaeology, I like it because I read a lot about archaeology. Here, I think you read this book. You read this? This book by Steven Pinker. And he he's psychologist, and he said, as human being, we are better angels of ours. the first time in the history of human being we are living in peace. Violence reduced. When they go to the study in this from the article, nobody dead in a normal life. Normal life. All their skull inside. Killed. I did the book, I haven't read, I gave you a copy. Very interesting book by psychologists and based all these cognitive abilities on archaeology. He took all the work of archaeology. Everything is gone.
Yeah, actually,
Because the culture has changed. We
The
create
brain
societies, we create power, we create many things. And violence, before, who defend you? One kill another. We are living really very violence in our history. Very violence creature. Now when we develop our culture, now to start stabilizing our life. We are in the golden age comparing with our past.
And you can
you see
notice
it in
this even in
archaeology.
children. Like
I'm
now,
sorry?
children, since they are kids, they know how to use the mobiles, the
Yeah.
iPads.
Yeah.
They speak earlier than our age.
Yeah.
You know, they're completely different. And like my mother said, they don't sleep. Before kids, you know, little babies, they used to sleep till they are like 1 year. Now you go visit them in the hospital, they're just born and they're awake. So maybe this is also the activation of what happens during
Yes.
pregnancy.
They
The
develop
brain
their
does
brain,
change.
yes.
and even our material
surroundings.
where it has changed.
Changed,
You
yeah.
know, we are very busy. Our mind is 24-hour busy because too many things to see, to deal with every day. Too many news. So this keep our mind
like activation even for
if
the
we are
fetus.
asleep, keep our mind 24-hour busy. I think in 2,000 or 3,000 years to come,
Yeah.
our brain will be changed. Not like this. Yeah. No, even not in size, but I think
Yeah, developing
some-
our ideas and
yeah, sure.
our functions. Even the abstract thinking is developing very fast. This is that we call it the queen of the brain, abstract thinking. All this, you take one hair from a human being, you can make babies.